Let me tell you what is at stake in the conversation about race that I've been having with John McWhorter. There are things that don't or can't get said when we talk about race in most venues in America. Those who have followed the 15-year-long conversation on this topic that I have been undertaking with John at the Glenn Show know what I'm talking about. Whether it's crime in Black communities or out-of-wedlock birth rates or academic underperformance or the unbearable intellectual lightness of much anti-racism agitation. In academia, in the mainstream publications and media outlets, and increasingly in K-12 classrooms, what I have called the bias narrative holds sway. Negative aspects of Black life are attributed almost entirely to the nation's history of racial oppression, which is said to begin in the early 17th century and to continue unabated to this day. We are a bandit society built on the genocidal plundering of unrepentant racists. That's one story you could tell. And if that story were just one of many circulating through our national discourse, it wouldn't be the worst thing. But this bias narrative has become not just one of many stories, it's now the only story. In newspaper opinion pages, in scholarly journals, and in educational materials disseminated throughout our schools. It's the story told by the White House. It's the story that ramifies out from the most elite precincts of our country and shapes ordinary conversations and relations between individuals. Its grip on so many areas of the public imagination has become so tight that anyone challenging it is viewed with suspicion and often enough outright contempt. If an alternative explanation for Black underperformance is proffered, it's not the explanation that gets challenged, but the individual making it. For to challenge this narrative, ipso facto, proves that one is a racist or a deplorable, or, if the challenger is a Black man, an Uncle Tom. This situation is morally and intellectually bankrupt. How we talk and think about race has consequences that can be measured not just in dollars and cents, but in the stagnant lives and dead bodies of too many Blacks. So, responding with ad hominem attack to an account of our current predicament that is not rooted in bias, it's not merely unfortunate, it is actively damaging. The stakes here are enormously high, and the hour is late. Candor, integrity, and courage, these are in short supply. Name-calling and character assassination have largely replaced debate, while naked emperors, pseudo-academics, and bombastic demagogues command the public square. Enter John and Glenn. Or, as I sometimes like to refer to our dynamic duo, enter the woke busters. In Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Emperor's New Clothes, two swindlers promise to provide an emperor with magnificent new clothes that will be invisible to those who are too stupid or incompetent to see them. Officials can plainly see that no clothes are being produced on the swindlers' looms, but none will say anything to avoid being thought of as fools. When the emperor walked through the city in these clothes, everyone could see that he was naked, but no one would be the first to say it. And then along comes an innocent child who, in his naivete, was willing to defy consensus and speak out. Now, the thing about that child in the story is not that he's saying it. It's not even that other people hear him saying it. It's that everybody knows that everybody else has heard him say it. The child has created a circumstance in which it has become common shared knowledge that the emperor has no clothes. Everyone knows that the others know the truth. The German political scientist Elisabeth Neumann coined a term that describes this phenomenon. She called it the spiral of silence. In a spiral of silence, when holding a certain view entails a stigma, then for fear of being seen as having that view, people stay silent. Thus, the masses believe that they are alone or in a small minority of people with the stigmatized view, when in fact, they are indeed one of the masses. In progressive controlled areas of our society today, and that's much of our society, we are suffering from a spiral of silence when it comes to the topic of racial justice. A great many people don't like it when Colin Kaepernick takes a knee at a football game and says, "I'm not going to stand for this national anthem," or when a Black Lives Matter activist rises with balled fists and says, "Burn this city down." But they're afraid to be the only one in their community saying it, to be perceived either as a racist or as a supporter of racism for holding mild views that arguably most Americans hold, views like white lives matter too. There is a deep point here. Though overt censorship is often spoken of as the leading threat to open discourse, the more subtle threat arises from the voluntary limitations of one's own speech that create spirals of silence. As John Stuart Mill recognized, it's not the iron fist of repression, but the velvet glove of seduction that is the real problem. Who, we must ask, will speak for compromise and common sense when to speak in this way is seen as a signal of a weak commitment to the struggle? Who will insist that we talk plainly and tell the truth about delicate and difficult matters, like the despicable black-on-black violence ravaging many of our cities, matters which we would all prefer to cover up or ignore? Who will declare the emperor to be naked? How can a nation sustain an elevated political discourse when the social forces of conformity, which promote silence, threaten to usher in a dark age? In truth, it cannot. But with a simple choice, with just a little bit of bravery, you and I can choose to be like that child who spoke truth to the empire. We can put an end to the gaslighting, the lying, and the willful blindness to reality on issues of race and social justice that are characteristic of our time. Professor John Hamilton McWhorter IV, with his books, his opinion pieces, and his public ministry at the Glenn Show, has for a quarter century been pointing the way. It is now up to those of us who are committed to an honest engagement with this age-old American dilemma of race and social justice to follow his lead, if only we dare. Congratulations, John.